Hello and welcome back to Fullerton College Pre-Press. This is Professor Ben Hewitt, and today we're going to take a look at PIA's Pre-Press Training Manual, Task 5, Module 5, and that mouthful means we're going to talk about finishing today. So let's look at some finishing options and how they affect our layouts and all the other processes along the way. The PIA would like you to know, would like you to be able to identify common finishing operations, would like you to communicate the importance of finishing within the industry, and understand the problems that these things cause to the production process, and also figuring out how we can facilitate them from the start. Like I've been saying, in pre-press, your job is to know the end from the beginning, to understand what environments and what processes any given project is going to have to survive. We're not just creating art, we're doing engineering here. We're creating things that have to go do things in the real world. Sometimes that's survive being embossed, and sometimes that's being mailed. There are lots of things that can happen to a print job, and it's our job to account for them and make sure that they are set up from the beginning to do it correctly. So what is finishing? Finishing is anything you do at the end of a printed project or to a product once you're done with all the normal stuff that makes it a little bit more special. Trimming and binding doesn't really count as finishing. That's normal bindery stuff. Most things get trimmed or folded or bound together in some fashion, but some get a little bit of an extra something to make them stand out, to make them special, to make them more durable, to make them do their jobs better. Even if their job is just to be pretty or fun or interesting, these help them do that. There are things such as lamination, numbering, foil stamping, embossing, die cutting, and converting, which we're going to talk about ad nauseum. So the finishing process is similar to the binding process in that it's post-press. After you're done printing is when you do this. Most printing presses do not want custom cut edges run through them. They don't want embossed things. If you've attached gold foil, that'll probably come off and go through your whole press. So finishing is called such because you kind of have to do them at the very end. Think about it in other terms. If you're baking a cake, you don't start by mixing frosting into the pan and then putting the batter on top to put in the oven, do you? Some things have to be done at the end in the proper order. They're kind of like special effects. I do like the calling them that because special effects are fun to me. I put out there that if ILM ever calls, it's been fun teaching you guys. See ya. I don't think ILM is going to call or WADA. But anyways, the point being, special effects is a fun way to look at it because they're effects that make the printing look more interesting, catch more eyes. Sometimes it makes them more functional. But anyways, the ability and the willingness to put these things in helps a full service print shop differentiate itself from the smaller quick print shops. Personally, I've mostly worked at quick printers and in-house print places where my print shop and my bindery were more limited in their capabilities. And if we wanted to do anything special, we had to outsource. Really, really good full service commercial printers will have all this stuff in-house. They'll have their own converters, they'll have their own laminators, they'll have their own stampers and package makers and everything right there in the same building. Like I said, I've not gotten to work in any place that has that in its own house other than a few limited capabilities. But maybe that's why I'm so intrigued by them. I find them so fascinating because they were this forbidden level of stuff I've never gotten to really play with until I started teaching that much. Anyways, since most of them don't have it, they have to go to a special secondary place. In fact, some processes are so weird that you really are almost guaranteed to have to go to a special bindery finishing place that's not your own. Understand then that if you're working with another company, not only does that slow down the job, which is important because time is the most important aspect in any print job, and it starts to cost more money, but it also requires an extra level of communication. If you're working even with a partner company that does bindery only, and they're doing your special die cuts or foil stamps for you, they're not in your team. They don't understand this project. They probably haven't met with the client the way you have. It's on you, you pre-press person, to help them understand what their task actually is, and to help them understand the parameters and the preferences of what the goal is and what they're trying to do. Not just put a stamp here, but why is there a stamp here? What are the issues that you're looking for? How is the client picky about how the stamping goes? Those would be my dogs. Yeah, boys, I know there's a cat. That's enough. Thank you. That would be Monty and Teddy, my good puppies. Anyways, they do add money and they do add time, but really it's the time that gets to you, because most jobs, by the time they reach you at the print shop, are already falling behind schedule. So now let's talk about some of the processes. Lamination. I do tease my wife a lot about this because she's an elementary school teacher. And as a printer, I know that elementary school teachers like to laminate things because lamination makes them durable, makes them waterproof, and makes them survivable. They laminate stuff and stick it on the walls in the classroom. They laminate stuff to send home to parents. Also, it all has an extra bit of stuff. There's also something that happens to book and magazine and paperback books and magazine covers. It's a plastic coating that's applied with a coating machine. It's similar to a waterless printing press. Anyone who's already gone through 101 will get the joke of waterless printing. Totally the future. Um, anyways, yeah, it's a special press that applies this clear plastic coating, and it applies it as a film, really. And it's very different, by the way, than a UV sprayed coating. There are liquid coatings that come through as a liquid and are ultraviolet light cured or cured through heat or other means that make them gloss coated, and that is different than a lamination. A lamination means you are adding something else to it and laminating the parts together. Um, Lamination, if you understand other terms of the word, might help you understand it. Plywood is a laminating process where you put different plies or layers of wood and you laminate them together. The traditional English longbow, if you're into archery, is a laminated wood bow made out of different layers of yew wood connected by fish gut, which is what they use traditionally as their adhesive to hold it together. I would really like one of those one of these days because they're really fun bows, and I don't own one, not yet. And even a lot of modern archery equipment is laminated. You have layers of different types of wood and also fiberglass all glued together, pressed together, and turned into one thing. That's laminating. A simple spray coat is not the same as laminating, is all I'm getting at, with way too much detail and way too much archery talk. Anyways, moving on. You want to make sure that your imposition is set up so you can get the correct pages laminated as efficiently as possible. So things you do is you try to create large sheet-wise forms and put as many things that you want laminated as possible onto one sheet. If you're working in a big shop or a shop with a lot of work going on, which hopefully you are at some point in your life, it'll kind of be your goal to do this, even if they're not the same customer. If Joe's Plumbing and Missy's Diner both want laminated paper on the same thickness of paper around the same week, why not put Missy's Diner menus and Joe's business cards on the same sheet when you print them? So when it goes to the laminator, you get both instead of having to do two lamination runs. It's all about finding ways to be efficient. And efficient, my own personal definition here, you're not going to find this in a dictionary. Efficiency is being lazy while also being smart about it. Efficiency is avoiding extra work. It's getting stuff done without having to spend so much of that annoying effort on it. Anyways, if you're not smart and you're trying to be efficient, then you're just lazy. Again, Ben definitions. Moving on. So you want to make sure that the side you want laminated, if you're only laminating one side, is facing up. Any extra work, including flipping them over, can A, slow you down, B, charge you more money at the bindery, and C, the worst of all options actually, confuse the binders. And if they don't know what's going on, that'll be a problem. So that means that anything you're going to do that's laminated out of a stack of things, you want to make sure that the last thing you print, so it's on the top, flipped to the right side. So other than lamination, most of the stuff is done for finishing using an old-fashioned letterpress. Remember our pal Gutenberg, who invented this back in 1450 something, ending the Middle Ages and beginning the Renaissance? Anyways, his type of press, or more modern versions, the type that uses an actual crash impact of lead letters pushing onto the paper, those are useful today. Even if you're not printing with them, those are good for finishing, because the same pressure giving devices are good for foil stamping, they're good for numbering, they're good for die cutting, embossing, and doing a lot of other things using the same old system because it still is a reliable system that feeds paper through typically and presses with constant high pressure against the paper. So that means all those other processes can be done by an old machine that can't really efficiently print anymore. So letterpresses don't have a plate cylinder, so they don't use a plate bend, but they do still have a gripper area. Um, Typically, more modern letterpresses, if you're not talking like an actual Gutenberg or like a Ben Franklin style press, anything from like the 1890s to modern day, and yes, they still make them, of letterpresses will have a gripper because they're going to involve paper feed. The really old ones like Gutenberg and Franklin and the good old days of, guys in linen work caps hand pulling giant levers. Once you get into the industrial revolution and machines powered by water power or electricity, uh, water power meaning water wheels, by the way, river powered. A lot of early factories use that as their power source. But anyways, anything using a power system typically does not have a person putting each sheet of paper in. At that point, they've all set up automated feed systems with grippers that'll grab the paper and pull it through the press, put it where it needs to go, line it up, and then spit it out. Technical term there, spit it out onto the pile, onto the delivery pile. Anyways, so letterpresses have grippers too, is what I'm getting at here. So when you're planning to do a piece that involves finishing, try to make sure that the things you need are near the press sheet's guide and gripper, near where those come together in that corner. Making it near the edge and near locatable corners that you measure from is a good way of making sure that stamping and embossing all happens accurately and efficiently. Once again, looking at our sheet here, we have our gripper and our guide marked with the X's. So hopefully you can have the people running the letterpress to do the finishing options use the same gripper and the same guide you did. Remember that it's vital to always measure from the same reference point. And that's true even when you switch to a letterpress system doing die cutting. If you're doing half sheets, because sometimes older letterpresses don't have the same sheet size that you're going to find on a modern offset press. So you have to cut the paper down to be able to fit onto the finisher, in which case the gripper becomes the guide. I already kind of talked about this, but most of the time, letterpresses don't have the same press area. Honestly, 20 by 26 is big for letterpress. Most of them are smaller. So that means, although that means you typically cannot letterpress the whole sheet, it does mean you might have to put in just a corner. If anyone has tried to staple farther than a stapler can reach on a sheet of paper, you kind of understand this. You try to line up the things you're going to staple to something that can actually reach it, or trying to punch holes with a hole puncher on a sheet of paper. You find ways to reach in as far as you can and line up whatever you need for that punch so you can get it. So push it in the corner. Put whatever you can towards the corners of your sheet that need to be any sort of letterpress finishing, embossed, foil stamped, die cut, etc. Whenever possible, put those off to the edges. That'll make it easier to line that up later for the finishing people. They will thank you. And more importantly, they'll get your job done more accurately and quicker. We're going to pause here and come back in a second video to finish this off. Thanks for listening and stay tuned.